It seems like there's no way to escape from them.
You have to be very careful about how you detox, because if you do it wrong, you are simply redistributing them around the body. So that means we can't just pee them out. And it also means they're going to head for the most fatty organ of the body, which is the brain.
Oh my God, it's in everything. And do we need to constantly do detox ourselves, which you gave a much easier solution, actually?
So I would take that very seriously. And that would be my first action. But I do have a question. Why your house smells wrong in the first place? Open the window and on your body as well. Why do you need perfume?
I'm Dr. Esra Çavuşoğlu, and I've been living a sober life for the past 18 years. My battle with addiction drove me to seek new methods, devices, and supplements to improve my physical and mental performance, enhance my quality of life, and ultimately live healthier for longer. From my experiences in addiction recovery, biohacking, and longevity to the latest global developments, from groundbreaking entrepreneurs to expert academics, the conversations I've had over the years are now featured weekly on Soberhead Podcast. Welcome to Soberhead Podcast. Today's episode is all about living healthy in toxic times. My guest, Dr. Jenny Goodman, is a pioneer in ecological medicine, and she sheds light on how the invisible toxins around us, whether in our food, our homes, or even in our personal care products, are silently impacting our health. We dive in the role of nutrition in detoxification, the hidden dangers of plastics, pesticides, and indoor pollution, and why the products we put on our skin are just as important as the food we put on our plates. Dr. Goodman also unpacks the health risk of electromagnetic radiation, the lesser-known dangers of air travel, and practical, natural alternatives that help us unpoison our lives. This conversation is both eye-opening and empowering, a call to action to take control of our health, make sustainable choices, and reduce our daily exposure to toxins. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss this one. This episode of Soberhead Podcast is brought to you with the support of Gedik Foundation for Education. For over 30 years, Gedik Foundation has been providing opportunities for youngsters, children, and women to realize their dreams through scholarships, projects, and social work. And we're proud to be on this journey together. Investing in education is investment in the future. Subscribe and support us in our quest to bring you the most current scientific data and continue your access to the world-renowned experts in their fields as guests on Soberhead, with Turkish translation and completely free of charge. Comment on the episodes, like, and share. Dr. Jenny Goodman, I am so thrilled. You know how many months I've been following you. I've been harassing you with emails, and you finally gave me this time to be able to record the podcast. There's so much to talk. Your expertise in how to live healthy in toxic times, if I can generalize it. If I'm not mistaken, you belong to the British Ecological Medicine Society.
It's the British Society for Ecological Medicine.
Okay, thank you.
.org.uk. No, it's not a problem.
Yeah, I think I said it upside down. It's only in Great Britain, that type of...
Yeah, this is the British Society for Ecological Medicine, but there are equivalent organizations in America, in Europe, and in Australia.
So, Dr. Goodman, my podcast is really focusing on making people healthy. And we talk a lot about the longevity, the gene therapies, the exosomes, the muscle, whatever. But, I think that we forget a super important part, what is making us sick. Mm-hmm. And there's so much around us making us sick. The things that we drink, food that we eat, cosmetics that we put on our face, the way we clean the houses, and then we're obsessing about the longevity. It seems like it's impossible unless you change your lifestyle. Yeah. And things that you use, things that you eat, air that you breathe, there's no longevity, and you're the perfect person. I really adore you. I'm trying to learn every second. just because of you, I made so many changes at home. I've been working around these things a lot. But I mean, I've been, after reading your book, Staying Alive in Toxic Times, it was your first book. I said, like, Esra, you cannot live like this anymore. So I changed the deodorant, I changed the cosmetic, I changed the shampoo, I throw the pots and pans away, you know, like I purchased new ones. I have to, for me, for my dogs, for my family. So welcome to the show. You explain so beautifully what's happening to us in these daily exposure to what you call it, the toxic cocktail. Almost. Why don't you start? What's happening, you know, and if this continues, what's going to happen to us?
Yeah. Well, what's already happening to some of us is an indication of the answer to that question, because there are some people who are ultra sensitive to the toxic chemicals in our environment. Those are the people with multiple chemical sensitivity. And those people are like a flag, a red flag, a warning of where we're all going to go. Now, the reason those people are more vulnerable is purely genetic chance. They happen to not have strong detoxification enzyme systems in their liver, which is what we need to break these substances down. But that difference would not have made them sick before the Industrial Revolution. You know, before petrochemicals, before big oil, before there were factories and oil burning facilities, before there was pollution basically in our environment, then those genetic differences in detox capacity wouldn't have made any difference to our health. But now they've become crucial. So when you say what's going to happen to us, well, there are those people who are very sick and very exhausted and can't leave their home in case they sit next to somebody on a train who's got perfume on that's synthetic and makes them collapse. That's one extreme. And the other extreme is the people who seem unaffected by almost all of it until they get cancer in their 50s. And of course, it's very hard to connect the dots, because what I meant by the cocktail is that we are subject to 100,000 different synthetic chemicals, and we are getting dozens of different diseases. Now, you can't draw a straight line chart, usually an arrow, and say chemical X causes disease Y. You can do sometimes. We know that benzene causes leukemia. We know that nuclear radiation also causes leukemia. But mostly, all these diseases are multifactorial. So I see people with a huge range of conditions, from arthritis to multiple sclerosis to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all of these conditions, including a lot of autoimmune ones. And what you find when you blood test and you look at them in great detail is, firstly, there are a lot of nutritional deficiencies. That's the good stuff that's missing. And secondly, there's a huge number of toxins in there. Now, where do they come from? They come from mining. They come from coal and oil burning. They also come from all the synthetic chemicals we have manufactured from petrochemicals. And that includes the pesticides, includes the synthetic fertilizers, which are on the earth and therefore in our crops and in our food, on our plate, in our bodies. They're petrochemicals. It includes also plastic. Everything made of plastic is a petrochemical. It includes synthetic fabrics that we're wearing on our skin. You know, if we're not wearing organic cotton or hemp or linen or flax or something made from a plant or an organically farmed animal, then we're absorbing the plastic particles from our synthetic clothing like nylon, rayon, polyester, viscose, those sorts of things. And not only that, when we've finished wearing them, they end up in landfill and spread that particle pollution around the planet, as they do when we put them in our washing machine. So these things are going round and around. What goes around comes around, and it comes back to bite us. You mentioned cosmetics. So synthetic cosmetics, to which there are plenty of alternatives. There's natural herbal versions of everything you want to put on your skin: moisturizer, perfume, deodorant, aftershave for the men. All these things have safe, natural, organic, herbal versions, but in most people's bathroom cabinets, they've got the petrochemical versions. And it's really important to point out that, yes, we inhale the pollution, the petrochemical car fumes from the air outside, and yes, we're eating the pesticides and the heavy metals and the synthetic fertilizers in our food, but the skin is the largest organ of the body. It is a huge absorptive surface, and whatever you put on the skin goes into the bloodstream, just as surely as if you had eaten it. And why this matters is that the vast majority of the pollutants we're exposed to, because they're petrochemicals, they come from crude oil, are lipophilic. That means they dissolve in fat. They're attracted to fatty tissue. So that means we can't just pee them out in the urine. And it also means they're going to head for the most fatty organ of the body, which is the brain. And that is not just if you eat or inhale these chemicals, it's if you put them on your skin, either through clothing, moisturizer, perfume, cosmetics, whatever, they're going straight in. That's why it's important to know what the alternatives are. And the final petrochemical product that people may not realize is petrochemical is pharmaceuticals. Almost all the modern drugs are made from petrochemicals. When I began medical school in 1976, still 1/3 of all the medicines in use were made from plants. They were not exactly herbal remedies. They were changed and altered and processed, but they were from the plant, like digitalis for the heart from foxgloves and aspirin from willow bark and so on. And now that is zero. And 100% of our drugs are made from petrochemicals. And that's for economic reasons that go back to the end of the 19th century, when it proved much cheaper and more economic for the big monopolies, the big companies, to use petrochemicals to make drugs rather than to farm the plants or forage them in the wild and do all the careful, loving processing that's involved in creating a proper herbal remedy. So we're eating, we're inhaling, we're rubbing these things into our skin. And what we end up with is huge epidemics of degenerative diseases that were rare or unknown a couple of 100 years ago. Right now, the Industrial Revolution obviously happened in Britain before it happened anywhere else. It began in the late 1700s. I imagine it came much later to Turkey, but from then, from whenever it began, you will be able to date the increase in heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and so on. And diabetes is a bit more complicated because it's essentially about extra sugar, about a huge amount of sugar in our diet, which began with colonialism, actually, and the sugar plantations, along with tea, coffee, cotton plantations in the Americas, using slave labor. And the sugar industry is still huge, but there is another factor in diabetes, which is one we haven't mentioned yet, which is heavy metal poisoning, particularly nickel. Nickel is a very common pollutant, and I find it high in all my diabetic patients. And when I can get it down with zinc, with vitamin C, with good diet, with detoxification measures, the diabetes does improve, the blood sugar control improves. Of course, you have to stop the people eating sugar as well.
Where do we get the nickel from?
Well, it's in just about everything. And there's a huge long list.
Oh, my God.
There's a huge long list in my first book. But largely, we get it from car fumes. Exhaust pipe is made of stainless steel. Stainless steel is 14% nickel. And as the exhaust fumes are coming out of the exhaust pipe, not only are they toxic in their own right, but they're so hot, they're hundreds of degrees centigrade, that some of the nickel is released from the pipe itself, and chromium also, chromium-6. And so we're inhaling the nickel particles along with the fumes, and also with coal burning. All coal and, fossil fuels are naturally contaminated with heavy metals because it's just there in the crust of the earth. And of course, it does no harm if it stays in the crust of the earth. But when we end up inhaling it from car fumes, lorry fumes, ships, trains, aeroplanes, all these forms of internal combustion engine transport, that's one way we get the heavy metals. Mercury, of course, is in many people's teeth, used for fillings. Aluminium is in silver foil that we wrap food in. It's in certain saucepans. It's in deodorants and so on. So, in both the books, actually, I go through in some depth where each heavy metal comes from and therefore how to avoid it. But one of the ways to avoid heavy metals getting into you is to have already optimal levels of the good metals. That's the essential minerals, right? So iron, zinc, selenium, iodine, tiny amount of chromium-3, manganese, and of course magnesium. All of these good minerals are good at pushing out the bad ones. Because how the bad ones do their damage is by pushing the good minerals off the active sites of enzymes where they're helping the enzymes to do their job. And so, if you have good level of zinc and selenium in your body, the mercury won't be able to get in because the atoms of mercury will simply be outnumbered by the zinc, selenium and iodine and the good stuff. So that's why nutrition is the bulwark against toxic pollution, as well as knowing where the pollution is, how to avoid it, and the alternative products you can use in your home, especially. Good nutrition is vital. And one of my favourite teachers, Dr. John McLaren Howard, said, nutrients are antitoxins and toxins are anti-nutrients. Many toxic metals and many other toxins do their damage precisely by pushing the good nutrients out. So it's about increasing the good stuff, decreasing the bad stuff. It is actually as simple as that.
Oh, well, I didn't know it was that simple because I was like thinking, oh my God, it's in everything. And do we need to constantly do detox ourselves, which you gave a much easier solution, actually.
Well, there are detox protocols that are useful, but rather than continually detoxing ourselves, let's detox ourselves once and then learn where that pollution was coming from, how it got into us, and learn how to avoid retoxing. So, for example, in my more recent book, Getting Healthy in Toxic Times, an ecological doctor's prescription for healing your body and the planet, which is not my title. I wanted to call it What's Got Into You? How pollution is damaging our health and what we can do about it. So I have divided that into the 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire. And basically earth it's the pesticides and the synthetic fertilizers. And the solution to that is to eat organic. Right? Do you have organic certification of food in Turkey?
Yes, we do.
You do. So I would take that very seriously. And that would be my first action. Now, in this country, people complain that organic food is more expensive. And it is. And there are several answers to that. Firstly, it shouldn't be. This is a political issue. We need to campaign and write to our members of parliament or whatever your equivalent is there and ask them why, certainly in Britain, the government is subsidising the huge monocrop industrial farms that use these toxic chemicals rather than subsidising and supporting the organic farmers, the organic and regenerative farmers who are rebuilding the soil and who've learned all sorts of techniques, or rather reclaimed the ancient techniques, to grow crops successfully without any pesticides at all. Right? You do companion planting, you plant one thing with another, you have animals grazing, you have animals fertilizing the earth, you rotate the crops. All these sorts of things mean that there's so much biodiversity in the field, just like in nature, because nature never does monocrops, that you don't get the pest infestations. And if you do, there are natural ways to deal with them, which Pesticide Action Network teaches all about. Wonderful organisation. They're helping farmers in Africa to grow cotton completely organically without the pesticides, so we can wear that safely on our skin. And so also the farmers don't die from pesticide poisoning and their children don't get neurodevelopmental disorders from the pesticides.
Because I did a previous podcast with a food engineer in Turkey, and he's a very well-respected person, professor actually, and he'd been sued by the government because he warned all the one part of Turkey that all these pesticides are making people cancer, giving people cancer.
Yeah.
And he had this, still the lawsuit going on. Unfortunately, Turkey, even though it's an agricultural country, the regulations is no different than Great Britain, United States, and here. Unfortunately, it's like everything is allowed. There's not much control happening. Most of our products that we're exporting to Europe is returning back because they find fair amount of toxic elements in it. So only programs like mine and a couple of more there are that we need to inform people so that what they need to pay attention to. But what I heard in one of your talk that, we shouldn't also mistaken us when we read organic on something.
I mean, it depends how strict your labeling is. That was relating to cosmetic products.
All right.
Where the labeling is completely deceptive. But with food, certainly in Britain, in the UK, if it says organic, it probably is. But the most organic is what is certified by our Soil Association. The Soil Association certification means it really is truly organic. And that means grown without any pesticides. It's really important to know where the pesticides came from. They were war gases, weapons of war. They are nerve agents that were used until 1945. And then when the war was over, the manufacturers simply repurposed the chemicals and tweaked them slightly, changed them, and marketed them as pesticides. Therefore, it is not surprising that the main effect they have on us is neurodegenerative disorders, which have exploded exponentially. So we've got Alzheimer's, we've got many other forms of dementia, we've got Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, motor neuron disease, all these neurodegenerative conditions and neurodevelopmental disorders in the children because the pesticides were designed as nerve poisons. They also are implicated in cancer very strongly. And when I was writing the new book, I discovered there was a vast amount of research, papers published in proper pucker peer-reviewed medical journals, thousands of them, clearly linking pesticide exposure to not only neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's that I mentioned before, also many types of cancer, particularly cancer of the reproductive organs, and also linking pesticides to endocrine disruption. Now, that's because the pesticides and also plastics and heavy metals are estrogen mimics. They have a certain molecular resemblance to estrogen, but they can sit on the estrogen receptors and send out estrogenic signals. And that is linked with our vast increase in cancer of the breast, cancer of the prostate, possibly also cancer of the endometrium, the lining of the womb, the ovary, the testis, and so on. So they're endocrine disruptors, they're carcinogenic, they are neurotoxins, and you can avoid 95% of them by eating organically grown produce. And if you can't buy it, you can grow your own. You only need a little pot on your window ledge. You know, you need a tiny patch of garden. If you live in a flat, an apartment, you still have a window ledge, and you can sprout seedlings. And, you know, if that's the best you can do, it's well worth doing. But when people say organic produce is expensive, I say, first, I've said, no, it shouldn't be. It's a political issue. Secondly, how much of your income do you spend on food? Now, again, I don't know what the figures are in Turkey, but in Britain, back in the 1950s and 60s, it used to be 33%. 1/3 of our income went on food. Today, it's down to 8%. 8% is almost nothing. So we have to reprioritize and make food a central part of what we spend our money on. And thirdly, it's health insurance. You know, you think of it as health insurance because having cancer is very expensive. You can't work, you lose your income. So I think of eating organic as health insurance. And lastly, if you're eating, let us say you're eating chicken 3 times a week, but it's battery farmed chicken. You know, it's grown in one of these very cruel mega farms where the chickens can't move and they've got no feathers left and they're treated with immense cruelty and they're injected with antibiotics because otherwise their immune systems, which are wrecked by stress, wouldn't prevent them getting constant infections. If you're eating that kind of toxic chicken, toxic both ethically and chemically, if you're eating that kind of chicken 3 times a week, and you change to organic, free-range, humanely reared chicken once a week, you're spending less money and it's better for you and better for the planet. You know? So eat less of the bad stuff, more of the good stuff, and that's the first change. The second source of toxins that we're exposed to is the water. Now, again, I don't know what your situation is in Turkey, but in this country, God knows what's coming out of the tap. I mean, I have a whole chapter on it in the new book, but I can give you a summary. Chlorine is coming out of the tap. Now, it was put in there for good reason, which is to kill dangerous bacteria. But
I think we have that too.
Yeah, I think you probably do. It's also it's toxic to the thyroid gland because it pushes iodine out of the body. Iodine is vital for the health of the thyroid, but also for the breast. Now, in the Netherlands, in Holland, they don't do that. They use ultraviolet light, a physical filtration system followed by ultraviolet light, and that kills all the bugs. I mean, we know that sunlight is antiseptic. So we could do that. We could have safe drinking water without chlorine. Many parts of the UK now have fluoride in the water. Almost nowhere in Europe, almost everywhere in North America. And there are quite a few countries that put it in, saw what happened to their infant mortality rates and took it out again. Chile is a case in point. Also, I think Cuba and Finland. It is a neurotoxin. It is toxic to the bone, the kidney, the thyroid, the ovary. And we know it damages children's IQ. Again, I found thousands of studies going back 90 years, clearly demonstrating that fluoride at the level it's put in our water is damaging children's IQ. It brings it down about 10 points, which is huge.
Huge.
It's not a nutrient. It has no role in human metabolism. There are, as for all these toxins, there are commercial reasons why it's being put in our water. It actually turns out that it's a waste product of the phosphate fertilizer industry.
Dr. Goodman, maybe, because in Turkey, we're kind of knowledge that we should not drink from the tap water for some reason, but there's another huge industry is to sell containers of water. But
they're plastic.
I would say, 80% are plastic. The other 20 is glass, but then they say like the way that they wash it, the detergent inside, and they may be more plastic and glass pieces. So like it seems like there's no way to escape from them.
It's a bit of a nightmare. It is a cabinet issue. But what I do is fit a water filter. And that's what I advise everyone to do. There are now really excellent water filters that will take 95% of that toxic stuff out of your tap. I mean, there's the chlorine, the fluoride. There's also plastics, microplastic particles coming out of the tap. There's PFAS, right, polyfluoroalkyl substances, and perfluoroalkyl substances, the PFAS, which are the forever chemicals, which also contain fluoride, and it's the fluorocarbon bonds that makes them last forever. These are very toxic forever chemicals implicated in birth defects and cancer and everything because they mess with our DNA. They are increasingly being recognized, and the things which used to contain them are being manufactured without them more and more. So non-stick pans, waterproof clothing, stain-resistant clothing, all that, we know it's poisonous now, and there is a move to make those things without them.
Can you tell me now, since we started slowly merging into the four walls that we're living in, how are they affecting us? Not like what happens to us after the fact, but how is it going through our skin if we wear a non-sweat fitness clothing or we have a non-stick pan? What happens then?
As far as we know, tiny amounts of it get into us every time we cook something in a non-stick pan, or if we have the waterproof clothing next to our skin, which we don't in this country because we'd have long sleeves under the waterproof. But the thing is, there is a difference between acute and chronic poisoning. What we learned about in medical school was acute poisoning, where, the child, God forbid, drinks a slug of bleach, and you rush to hospital and they sort you out. But what we're talking about is minuscule amounts every day. But all we know is that it gets into us. I find it in fat samples. I find it in blood samples. And we know that it's toxic. And we can filter our water to completely avoid those things. We can, and it's much better than buying the containers of water. It's cheaper and it makes more sense. And you can get yourself some clean glass bottles if you're traveling and put a pad, we get padded glass bottles now. Fill it from your own filter tap and take it with you. That's the first thing to do in your kitchen, really, is to fit a water filter. And then...
But all the detergents, dishwasher products...
Yeah, so we're coming on to that. Yeah.
All right.
There really are safe alternatives to every single one of those. And they're all listed in chapter 7 of the new book, Getting Healthy in Toxic Times, which is called A Tour of Your House. Right. So it's about the surprising poisonings of everyday life, right? Indoor pollution. Let's start in the kitchen. The dishwasher stuff, that is a problem. But you can, if you wash dishes by hand, it's very easy to get much, much safer products. For example, we have something here called Ecova, which is a bit better, but not 100% better. We also have a company called Suma, S-U-M-A, which makes eco-leaf washing up liquid and soap and stuff for the dishwasher and so on. And you can smell the difference. You know, if you use the conventional stuff, you have to open the windows and run out the room, or I do.
Question, I heard that from these dishwasher tablets.
Yeah.
There's like a little film stays on the glasses and on the plates. Is it?
I suspect there is. And if you can wash your dishes by hand, the products are more available for that, the safe herbal products. Just keep the dishwasher for the occasional dinner party. But if you look in the cupboard under the kitchen sink, there's all sorts of cleaning products which are full of toxic chemicals. And here they have the skull and crossbones sign on them, which means they're poisonous. But the manufacturers are just worried about somebody accidentally eating or inhaling a lot of it. That's not what we see. We see tiny, tiny, but regular, everyday contact with these things. And the things you spray around the kitchen, the antibacterial spray and the surface cleaners, if you spray them, you're not only getting them through your skin, you're also inhaling them through your lungs, which is particularly bad for children and is creating asthma and eczema and all sorts of problems in the kids. So for all of these, I have listed alternative products, but I can't tell you what's available in Turkey. But I know that we've been cleaning our homes for thousands of years without petrochemicals. And you can make something just from sodium bicarbonate, and a little bit of water. You can make a paste that cleans virtually everything. Some people clean their windows with vinegar. I don't do that because it smells like a fish and chip shop. But
the apartment that I live in, the floors are wood floors, and we clean with vinegar and water. I'm like, there's this weird smell. What is it? Finally, I figured out that comes from the vinegar, but it's healthier, I guess.
It's much healthier, but you can just clean the windows with a damp cloth and what we used to call elbow grease, which means just doing that. So the cleaning chemicals can all be substituted. And then there's the pots and pans, and you mentioned the pots and pans. And we shouldn't be too worried about the pots and pans, because if you're basically healthy, you can cook most things in most pans. Stainless steel has nickel in. That's only a concern if you're diabetic. But it also depends what you're cooking it. If you're just boiling an egg or boiling some rice, it is not a concern because the metal doesn't come out into the food. Where the metal comes out into the food is if you're cooking something acid. So if you're cooking fruit or berries or something with tomatoes, or you've squeezed lemon juice onto the food, that's acid, and that will take the nickel out of a stainless steel pan and the aluminium out of an aluminium pan. So in those instances, we need to be careful. And again, there's a long list of safe alternative pots and pans that you can get. You can get cast iron, you can get glass, you can get all sorts of others.
Dr. Goodman, also like the way that we store the products, like our lives is wrapped with plastic everywhere, but does it matter? Like if you put something cold in a cold plastic container and keep it in the refrigerator?
The freezer. The fridge is not so cold, and I no longer have any plastic in my fridge at all. So you use ceramic dishes, right? Like you don't have your butter in plastic, do you? Your butter would be in a ceramic dish. So you put your cheese in a ceramic dish, your fish, your meat, your vegetable leftovers, your cooked.
What happens if they are in the plastic? Let's say you bought it and it's still in the plastic, or your container is plastic and you have butter in it because you mentioned you don't keep it in plastic.
No.
Does it?
Well, we buy butter wrapped in kind of a paper, and the minute I get it home, I put it in a dish which is ceramic. It's china. And we need to keep everything in those ceramic dishes, the same kind of bowls or plates you would eat from, because you don't eat from a plastic plate. The same kind of bowls and plates we would eat our food on, that's what we need to keep everything in the fridge. And if you need to keep it covered, you put it on a plate and you put a bowl on top of it. And once you get used to it, it's really...
How is that plastic affect the food inside?
we know that the microparticles of plastic get into the food.
Like any moment, like it sits in it and it dissolves into it?
Not instantly. It's cumulative. So the longer the plastic is in contact with the food and the warmer the environment, the higher the temperature, the more plastic is transferred. So, if your cheese is touching a bit of plastic for 5 minutes, I'm really not worried. But if it's wrapped in plastic and kept somewhere warm for 2 weeks, then I am worried. Because plastic breaks down. It does not biodegrade. It breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces of plastic. And that's what we call the microplastics and eventually the nanoplastics that have ended up in landfill, in the oceans, in the fish, in the birds, and in all of us. And it's almost the only thing that we don't have a specific method for detoxing. I mean, saunas help, done in the way I describe in my first book, wiping off the sweat. But we haven't got like a magic medicine that can detox plastic, whereas for all the heavy metals we've got specific supplements which, combined with vitamin C, will get those metals out of the body.
I did a podcast with JJ Virgin, and she was like, I really do not understand why people are doing, first of all, juice fasting, because, it's a lot of sugar. Instead of doing that, at least eat the food, fruits, not drink. But also, you're allowing all these fat cells to release the heavy metals and toxins into your system, and they're just even worse instead of being just held in.
You have to be very careful about how you detox, because if you do it wrong, you are simply releasing the substances and redistributing them around the body. But we have, in the British Society for Ecological Medicine, worked out some very solid, well-tested protocols for detoxing where you don't do that. You release the substances and then you remove them. So there's...
What do happen though? Please share. So because I want to inform people, if they do a detox without really paying attention, or if they get into the sauna without really taking binders, what happens if it's distributed?
They'll feel worse. And one of the big problems connected with this is obesity, because the fat cells are storing all the fat-soluble toxins like the pesticides and so on, and the plastics. When the person tries to lose weight, if they lose fat, they also lose what is stored in the fat, and that goes into the blood. So they feel so terrible that they immediately start overeating again to build the fat back up. And therefore, when I see someone like that, I'll say, detox first, weight loss second. It has to be that. Now, let me give you an example of how to detox without just redistributing, right? If you are detoxing, let us say nickel, we mentioned the heavy metal nickel before. Now, some people just use vitamin C and zinc. And vitamin C and, the zinc particularly, will displace the nickel from where it's sitting, but it will then just redistribute it about the body. But methionine, which is an amino acid, will chelate the nickel and carry it out of the body through the kidneys and through the bowel. So you have to do both what releases it and what chelates it, right? And we have loads of good substances for chelating nickel, mercury, aluminium, and so on. Lead is much more difficult. Lead hides in the bones. And there is a view that we ought to just leave it there. And that does more harm if you try to get rid of it. And some heavy metals, particularly cadmium, which is in people who've been smoking for many years, I have found that really it needs intravenous detoxification to get rid of the cadmium, because it's very sticky and hard to clear. But we can get rid of it.
Dr. Goodman, also there's this it's super popular, scented candles. These special machines to put some nice smells in the houses. All the department stores are bombarded with smells. I don't like to go through the perfume department because they spray on you, literally. I heard that it's super, super, super dangerous, actually, these chemical scents.
Yes. The scented candles and the conventional perfumes and everything that goes on in those big department stores, you're absolutely right. These are petrochemicals, finely divided. They go straight in through our nose, into our brain, right? The olfactory nerve at the top of the nose is about 1 inch long. So the minute you can smell it, that means it's in your brain. They are linked with childhood leukemia. They are linked with all sorts of diseases. And if you want a lovely smell, the solution is very simple. You get natural essential oils from flowers, jasmine, rose, rosemary, lavender, lemongrass, frankincense. These are all made from flowers. And this is what perfume was before the Industrial Revolution. This is what perfume was. They are completely harmless. They smell wonderful. You can use them to scent your room. Okay, so you get an oil burner, ceramic oil burner, not plastic. You put a little candle under, and the candle should be a beeswax candle, right? Not petrochemical candle, ideally not a soya candle either, because soya farming is nightmarish in many ways, but made of beeswax. And you burn that essential oil. You put some water in the top, and you put some drops of your lavender or frankincense, jasmine, whatever, on top, and you burn that. That's how to make your house smell lovely. But I do have a question. Why your house smells wrong in the first place? Open the windows, yeah? Open the windows. Open the windows and empty the bins. That's the trash, the rubbish. And then you probably won't need anything. But if you do, use natural essential oils, and on your body as well. Why do you need perfume? If you wash regularly, you should not need deodorant of any kind at all. I think we have to reacclimatize ourselves to the smell of human beings. We are animals. Sweating is essential. Sweating is detox. If you're using antiperspirants, you're stopping yourself detoxing. The only sweat that smells bad is if it's old, so you haven't washed, or if it's the sweat of fear. Okay, if it's the sweat of fear, it smells terrible. But if you're running and you're physically active, go and have a shower. And some people, patients of mine who've used the natural essential oils, the flowers, they say to me, "Oh, Dr. Goodman, it smells wonderful, but it only lasts a couple of hours." To which I say, yes, because it's a natural substance and your body knows how to break it down, because the biochemistry of flowers aligns with the biochemistry of animals and people. So, of course, we break it down. So you carry a tiny glass bottle if you want, and you put it on every couple of hours if you need anything at all. So, yes, you're right. Scented candles are a problem in the home. Finishing off with the kitchen, food wrappings.
Sure.
We get paper bags again now. You can just put your food in a paper bag. You don't have to wrap it in plastic wrap or cling film. Can you wrap it in aluminium foil? It depends what it is. You can wrap a sandwich in aluminium foil, but if you're, let's say, cooking fish in the oven and you've squeezed some lemon juice on it, if you wrap the foil around that, the lemon will take the aluminium out. So, back in the bathroom.
Yeah. That's, it's just like when I look to my bathroom, oh my God. Everything is synthetic, was at least.
Yeah.
I started slowly. It's difficult. We live in a vanity world. It's like so difficult suddenly to change everything, become this natural human being, because we got used to it. The nail polish, the hair dyes.
That's right.
The fillers and the Botox and the yada yada.
All of it is A, toxic, and B, completely unnecessary. But what I would say is nobody should try to make all those changes at once. One change per week. And what I've done in chapter 7 of this book is I've gone through every room in the house, including the bathroom, and told you what changes you can make and how to make them simply. Now, obviously, the products available will be different between Turkey and Britain.
Sure.
But the section on personal care products, as they're called, I started calling them personal scare products.
Oh, nice word.
I realised what was in them, But you can get wonderful versions of these made by Suma, Avalon, Dr. Bronner's, Utakram, which is from Denmark. And if you look on the website of the Soil Association, they have health and beauty pages. And their health and beauty pages recommend the products which are really organic. Because, yes, there is a huge problem with labelling all over the world. In Britain, it is perfectly legal to label, let's say, a moisturiser as organic if it contains only 1% organic ingredients. So just reading the label organic is meaningless, but there are two ways to check if it's safe. One is look on the Soil Association's website. If they mention it, it's good. They're very strict. And secondly, there's another organisation, an international organisation called Cosmos, It's made of many different organisations, including our Soil Association. And if a cosmetic product has got the Cosmos certification on it, it's genuinely organic. Similarly for clothing, if it's got the GOTS standard on it, GOTS, that's Global Organic Textile Standards, that tells you it really is genuinely organic and safe. So we have to be ever so careful. This applies to makeup, to hair dye, to sunscreen. Sunscreen is a big one because they're trying to tell us that we need to put sunscreen on ourselves and our kids to prevent skin cancer. And in fact, the evidence is that the sunscreens themselves are full of toxic carcinogenic substances that are going in through the skin.
All type of sunscreens?
No, the commercially available ones. And there are, I've done an Instagram post on this. I can't remember all of them, but there are definitely some safe sunscreens out there now. One made by Badger, one made by Sweet Bee, B-double-E, like buzzing bee. And there are 2 or 3 others that people have told me. People have written in on social media and said, oh, I found this one, I found that one. And I check the ingredients lists. And there are some good ones. And they're mentioned in this book on page 174. Yes, Sweet Bee Organics, Badger, and also Odylique, Odylique, which is mentioned by the Soil Association. But if you're going out in the sun, then you have been covered up indoors all winter. It is madness to put on a bikini and lie on the beach. You will burn. What we need to do is expose ourselves slowly and gradually. Okay, so I've got my sleeves rolled up. I've had my sleeves rolled up all summer. I can go somewhere hot and my forearms won't burn. But the rest of me hasn't been exposed. I live in England. It's cold, right? So if I go somewhere hot, like Turkey, I would have 10 minutes in the sun the first day, only 10 minutes, 15 minutes the second day, 20 minutes the third day. You build up a tan. That is your best protection. So we don't need these sunscreens. We just need to cover up and be careful and make our exposure gradual. But if you do want sunscreens, yeah, there are safe ones around now. Perfume we've talked about. Dental care is an issue. Because not only people have mercury fillings in their teeth, and mercury is a known neurotoxin, and of course we have safe ways of removing them. And then when they've been removed, you detox the mercury using chlorella and cilantro and sulfur and selenium, iodine, zinc, loads of vitamin C, all sorts of things to do.
How about the toothbrushes that they're mostly in plastic, like the brushes are?
Wooden toothbrushes now with natural bristles. Yeah. So that's something to look out for, natural toothbrushes. But also most conventional toothpaste has got fluoride in it, which the dentist tells you is good for your teeth and is not. It makes the teeth harder, but it actually damages the teeth and the bones. And they have a certain amount of detergent in. You know, if you brush your teeth with conventional toothpaste, your mouth gets frothy. It makes a lava. It's full of froth. That froth is because there's detergent in there. We don't need the detergent. So we can now get natural forms of toothpaste, like made by Kingfisher, by Green People. There's many other safe natural toothpastes now. But what people need to learn to do is to get a magnifying glass, if they're over 45, and read the ingredients list on everything. So if you're in a shop, you take your magnifying glass and read the ingredients list. If you don't know what they are, look them up. And if you're ordering something online, you get the ingredients list before you order. And you check everything. And it's hard work at first, but it becomes easier.
It seems like, there's also this, all manufacturers, rely on this, like there's a safe limit of something. But, when you keep adding all these safe limits of this, that, and the other, like everything is polluted.
Exactly. The so-called safe amount of something does not allow for the cocktail effect. Because if you are encountering every day 100 different chemicals at a level which they found in the lab was safe, but they didn't allow for the other 99. So the only safe level of a poison is 0, really. And if we boycott all these petrochemical products and we start buying the natural organic versions, then the natural organic producers will flourish and the petrochemical ones will wither away. And this is what we've got to do. We've got to vote with our wallets. One thing women need to be aware of is menstrual products. Tampons and pads are full of...
Thank God that I'm in my menopause, so like I don't need to worry about that one.
Plus, isn't it? But young women need to know that they're full of plastic and dioxins and God knows what, but you can get safe ones. There's a company called NatraCare, N-A-T-R-A Care, NatraCare, make completely safe pads and tampons. And the same for babies' nappies, diapers, right? They're also full of plastic and dioxins.
What does happen? Still goes through the skin and causes what?
We think it goes through the skin and causes everything that petrochemicals cause. The neurodegeneration, which we see in the kids, unfortunately, the neurodevelopmental disorders, potentially cancer. Look, when I graduated from medical school in 1982, there was no such thing virtually as childhood cancer. I mean,
yeah, of course. You know, I was thinking when I was a child and my sister was a child, few years younger than me, even my brother, I guess, there were no any these, ready children diapers. We had like cloth, they were washing it and they would keep using it.
That's right. And a lot of people here now are going back to those reusable nappies. And there are also reusable menstrual pads as well, which is what we had until 100 years ago. The same with the nappies. You simply wash them. And it is hard work. There is no denying it. And most of us women are now out at work. There isn't somebody being the housewife at home. But what I think somebody should set up a business, and actually it did exist when my kids were little, which is basically a mobile laundry service for the nappies. You could do it for menstrual products as well. They come to your door, they have a big bucket, they collect the dirty nappies, they launder them, they bring them back to you. So if you're a busy working mum, you don't have to do it. But yes, we need to be using cloth nappies. When I was a kid, people would hang them out on the washing line to dry.
Yeah. Dr. Goodman, I don't think that people, when they were producing this, let's say like in the 50s, probably most of these started, I don't think that they were thinking that was going to cause such disaster for the universe, for the world, for the humanity, for the animals, for the plants. But they're getting affected as well. It's not like, you're on the top and you're not using any of these and then the rest of the people get poisoned, but you're safe. Like everybody get affected from it. Presidents to the street person.
So this has always been my question. The manufacturers of these poisons, do they not care about their own grandchildren who are going to inherit the earth? And I'm afraid the conclusion I've come to is no, they don't, because power and money are very powerful addictive drugs, right? And if somebody is a drug addict, they want that drug more than they want anything else. They'll kill their own grandmother to get that drug if they're running out.
Right.
And the people at the top who are in power and at the top of the petrochemical industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the pesticide and plastics industry and so on, they want their profits to continue, and they are so blinded by that they literally cannot hear what you just said, which is, what about humanity? What about your own grandchildren? What about the planet? What we're doing to the planet? There was a conference a couple of weeks ago in Geneva about plastic pollution. But of course, all the plastic manufacturers came and the oil countries and the oil companies came because it's an oil product. And they went on about recycling and reusing, which of course are better than nothing. But what they absolutely refused to do was reduce production. The only way they will reduce the production of all these poisons is if we, the consumers, stop buying them. And the only way that's going to happen is education and supporting the people who are making the alternatives. So there's a whole section in chapter 3 about how to reduce your use of plastics and what you can use instead of plastic. And there are 2 really tiny little books about it. One's called Going Plastic Free by a chap who founded Greenpeace. Another one's called How to Save the World for Free by Natalie Fay. Right, so these are recommended in chapter 3 of the book. They're tiny little books. They take you half an hour to read, and it tells you how to replace all the plastic in your life, in your home, with other options. So there are other options. But, we should think about what's in the bedroom as well.
Yeah.
Because we spend 1/3 of our life asleep in bed, and what your mattress is made of might be very, very important for your health. All right. Now, do not worry about it if your mattress is more than 1 or 2 years old. There are lots of toxic synthetic chemicals in most mattresses, but within 1 or 2 years, they've outgassed, right? They've got rid of it, especially if you have the windows open, which you always should in the bedroom. But if you're buying a new mattress, you want to make sure that it's organic. And certainly in this country, it's really easy now to find organic mattresses. 20 years ago, it was really difficult. Yeah. And it was impossible to get organic sofas and cushions and carpets and soft furnishings. It's getting easier because people's consciousness is raised about it. So buy an organic mattress when you're buying new. And in your wardrobe, I don't know if you have this problem in Turkey. Here we have a problem with moths. Moths eat the clothing.
I had it when I was living in New York, and I mean, that was terrible. So, I'm sure there is, but I thank God that I'm not dealing with it.
So if people are dealing with it, the conventional stuff that's used to get rid of the moths is paradichlorobenzene. It's extremely toxic. It's the commonest toxin I found when I took fat samples from people. However, guess what? Lavender oil works. Just lavender oil, the same essential oil that you can use as a perfume or to, perfume your living room. And neem oil works as well. Neem oil is from the Indian neem tree, Neem. Neem oil doesn't smell so nice, but if you can...
it might be worth talking about it in my country. Now that while you were talking, I was thinking, I see majority of these mothballs. Obviously, I don't go into people's closets, but I do see in public restrooms.
That's right.
In public restrooms, the sink, they keep
purple mothballs. They are full of paradichlorobenzene, and as I said, I found it more commonly than any other insecticide. It is an insecticide. It is completely toxic. It's completely unnecessary. Lavender oil, with or without a bit of neem oil, sprayed on the clothes once a week or every 2 weeks, will get rid of the moths. That is all you need. And the last thing to say really about the bedroom is not to dry clean your clothes.
Oh, yeah, that's very important. Can you share a little bit? Because I heard in your conversation and I started freaking out about that as well.
So dry cleaning chemicals are trichloroethylene and trichloroethane, tetrachloroethylene and tetrachloroethane. Even the WHO, the World Health Organization, classifies them as carcinogenic. They are really carcinogenic. And the people who work in those dry cleaning places, they don't look so healthy. But there is a solution. If there's something you really have to dry clean, bring it back from the dry cleaners and hang it outside on the washing line in your garden for a week for the chemicals to outgas. And then you can bring it back into your wardrobe.
Do you believe in these organic dry cleaning
No, I'm
places?
very skeptical.
All right.
And, I just think sometimes we have to compromise, but not on that. I don't dry clean anything. The last thing to be aware of really is the hall, the living room, everywhere else. The floors, wooden floors are best. Most carpets are impregnated with toxins, and soft furnishings like sofas and cushions and curtains, if they are made of synthetic material, remembering that all that synthetic material is essentially petrochemical, it is flammable, it can catch fire. And therefore, by law in this country, these synthetic soft furnishings must be impregnated with flame retardants to stop them catching fire. But the flame retardants are polybrominated biphenyls and polybrominated diethers. Now, if you hear the word bromine in there, polybrominated, lots of atoms of bromine in there. And bromine, like chlorine and fluoride, is a toxic halogen that pushes iodine out of the thyroid gland. And one of the many epidemics we have is an epidemic of low thyroid, hypothyroidism, often undiagnosed. 100 years ago, they would have simply given you iodine. It would have solved the problem. Now people end up on thyroxine, on drugs, with surgery, all sorts of things. And we're short of iodine not only because we haven't got enough of it in our diet, it's in fish and it's in seaweed, but also because when we're exposed to the bromine from the synthetic soft furnishings and the fluoride from the toothpaste and the tap water and the chlorine from the tap water and the swimming pool, that pushes the iodine out. In terms of the effects, it is much, much easier to see the effects at population level than at the individual level. So, if my next door neighbour, who's only 32, has got cancer, I cannot tell you why in her individual case, unless I take a detailed history for an hour, but I can tell you that young women of 32 did not get cancer 50 years ago. Right? It was very, very rare. And when they tell us it's because we've got an aging population, we have to say, no. Cancer is increasing fastest among children. So we are poisoning ourselves, and we can learn to unpoison ourselves. And the last thing I would say is we've only talked about chemical poisoning. We haven't talked about the electromagnetic radiation.
I was just going to come there because, that's my really soft spot. I have midnight, my Wi-Fi get turned off. At least I don't receive it while I'm sleeping. Can we put the electromagnetic poisoning as well with the what's happening in the airplanes? Because we're living in a very modern world. Everything is much easier. The phones, the flights, the super high charged cell phone towers, because you have interesting, very, very informative, very important warnings for all of these.
What you can do if you want to find out about it, look at chapter 6 of the new book. Chapter 6 is called Poisonous Tech, and it is about the nature of the electromagnetic radiation which is coming out of our phones. Now, we are electromagnetic creatures. We evolved with the electromagnetic radiation from the sun, visible light, ultraviolet, infrared, and with the electromagnetic field of planet Earth. And you can be in touch with that again instantly by standing barefoot on the grass or on a beach. And we should all do that every day. It's probably easier in Turkey than in England, because in our winter, nobody wants to stand barefoot on the grass. It's far too cold. But you can put your hands on the grass, actually. That's not so cold. What we've done is we've surrounded ourselves with wavelengths and frequencies which are completely alien to the physiology. They're completely alien to our bodies, and we don't have a way of handling them, just as we don't have a way of handling the other end of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is X-rays and gamma rays and nuclear radiation. That's equally dangerous. But what we now know, and again, I found thousands of published papers on this, going back about 40, 50 years, because this technology was introduced a long time ago in Sweden, that unfortunately there's a strong link between the radiation coming out of the phone, or the mobile phone mast, the cell phone tower, or the Wi-Fi router, or the Bluetooth, whatever, and brain tumours. Cancer in general, but particularly brain tumours, and particularly in young men, if they're holding the phone right next to their head. And if you read the manufacturer's instructions that come in the box with a mobile phone very carefully, they do say, hold it at least 2 centimetres away from your head. Nobody reads that. The manufacturers say that because they want to cover themselves. Their insurers will not cover them for being sued, and they have been successfully sued for people's brain tumours. But the insurers insist that they put that in there, so they do. If you hold it at a greater distance, it is much less dangerous. So we need to be texting, we need to use speakerphone, and we need to use, the tubes that can keep it further away from your head. We need to minimize our use. Nobody's indispensable. We need to turn it off, flight mode, or actually off, if we're carrying it in a pocket or on our person. Because what we're seeing is young men with a phone in the pocket getting colon cancer, prostate cancer, testicular cancer, young women with a phone in the pocket getting ovarian cancer, young women with a phone in the bra, God forbid, getting breast cancer in the inner section of the breast, where it's very, very rare because they've had their phone there. And most frightening of all, people carrying their babies in a sling, which is great. I believe in carrying babies in a sling, but some of the manufacturers are putting a little pocket at the back of the sling, and mums are putting their phone in there 1 inch from the baby's heart, which is an electrical organ. Okay, so we can use this technology, but we can use it safely. And that's what chapter 6 of the book is about, how to use it safely. There are a few devices you can buy to put around your phone, hats you can wear if you're in the vicinity of a mobile phone mast, which you are if you go on a motorway journey or a train journey. You know, there are unfortunately studies from Switzerland showing if you live nearer than 600 meters to one of these mobile phone masts, your risk of dementia is greatly increased. So we need to put ourselves further away from it. We need to buy some of the materials that can protect us from it. Extremely electrosensitive people need these special gloves just for texting. Most of us don't feel it, though. And that's why we need the information. So this is not a counsel of despair. We can continue to use this technology, but we need to learn to use it more safely. And we could wish that the manufacturers had chosen a wavelength less inimical to human biology. I don't know why they didn't. And 5G is a huge worry because we were in our country, we didn't have it up until very recently. And I was like, oh, thank God, at least one thing is missing. But now that's there as well. Dr. Goodman, before we end the podcast, I really want to hear the story of that one pilot that you treated and so many things that you dealt with him and things that we are exposed in the airplanes. It's like beyond. It's in chapter 7 of my first book, Staying Alive in Toxic Times, a seasonal guide to lifelong health, because it's about seasonal living and seasonal nutrition. Yeah, the thing is about being on an aeroplane, you've got everything going on at once. Firstly, you can't open a window. You've got the pesticides that they spray if they're going to or from a tropical destination. You've got the leaks from the engine oil, right? Because there are not proper filters. Apart from on the 787, there are not proper filters. So the air that you as a passenger and the air stewards and stewardesses are breathing in the cabin, the air that the pilot's breathing in the cockpit is contaminated with cresyl phosphate, tricresyl phosphate, and many other substances that come from the engine oil, right? It's a system they've got. It's an engineering problem that means you're breathing that toxic air. Plus, they've got polystyrene containers for their food, giving off styrene gas. They've got plastic everywhere, and they've got sometimes the insecticide spraying. All these chemicals on the plane are not necessarily different from what we encounter in the rest of urban life, but you can't open a window. You're in a tiny space, and you're in a tiny space for many hours. Plus, because you're high up, you're exposed to electromagnetic radiation as well, of a kind that we don't get down here on Earth. And finally, of course, you've got the messing with your pineal gland because of the time zone problem. If you're flying across time zones, you're getting jet lag. The pineal gland in your brain is not producing melatonin properly. And by the way, there are other things that damage the pineal. Using blue light or white light in the evening, when we're meant to be winding down and having only dim orange-red light. Of course, we would have been sitting around the fire, wouldn't we, for a million years? All of those things, and fluoride also does terrible damage to the pineal gland. So you've got the jet lag, the time zone messing, the electromagnetic radiation, and the cocktail of chemicals.
What do you suggest people to do? Like, if you would like to help someone that, let's say, I'm flying from Istanbul to New York or vice versa, what would be the first thing or first couple of things that one needs to do to detox themselves from that
firstly,
toxic?
You can protect yourself on the flight. This is called the Cambridge Mask Company Pro. It says filters air pollution, viruses and bacteria, but the person from whom I got it is an airline stewardess who has retired. She's retired from ill health. CambridgeMask.com, and she is campaigning for all the pilots and, air stewards and stewardesses, cabin crew they call them, and the frequent flyers, the businessmen who fly 3 times a week, who've all been poisoned and are all chronically sick, usually chronic fatigue, cancer, especially breast cancer. Something like a third of all female cabin crew end up with breast cancer. It's huge. The airlines know this, but the profit motive is making them suppress it and dismiss it when people like me talk about it. So aerotoxic syndrome is a combination of all these factors. And the first symptom is usually fatigue, but they also often get respiratory problems, and they often get gut problems, and they get better when they have time off. This is what they always say. They have 3 or 4 weeks off and they get better. Then they go back to flying and they feel terrible. And I've seen many, many pilots and cabin crew with this problem, and most of them need to change their job, but some of them can continue if they work what's called 33%. And it's such a well-paid occupation that you can actually live on working only 1/3 of the time. But they always find they have to detox in between. So first thing is, if you're flying, wear one of these masks and take loads and loads of vitamin C with you on the flight. Okay. Now, this is a problem because you can't take your own bottle of water with a vitamin C in it.
Unfortunately.
You have to buy water at the last minute, and it's in plastic bottles. And that's dreadful, but there is nothing you can do about it. But take some vitamin C powder or vitamin C capsules with you, and take some on the hour, every hour, and you won't feel quite so bad. Ideally, take your own packed lunch because airline food's pretty horrible as well.
Sure.
Doesn't make you feel any better. So drink loads of water, take lots of vitamin C, and detoxing. The pilot in the book is the same as detoxing anybody, right? There are 7 basic methods. There's organic vegetable juicing. There's Epsom salts baths. There's saunas done in a very particular way that I describe, where you keep wiping off sweat. There's colonic hydrotherapy to clear that passage and cleanse the liver. There's sprouting your own seedlings on your windowsill. And there's using vitamin C in very high doses to deal with the heavy metal, because there's nickel on the aeroplane, and we always find nickel in the pilots and the cabin crew. And lastly, there are specific supplements to detox specific toxins. So, silica gets rid of aluminium, zinc vitamin C with methionine get rid of the nickel, iodine gets rid of fluoride and chlorine, and so on. And usually with the pilots, they're so sick that you have to go very gently, very slowly. The first 3 or 4 months, you can't really detox. You just build up all the good nutrients and get them to rest and go for gentle walks in the fresh air. Then you start the detox protocol that I described. I also use alpha-lipoic acid, especially if they've got mercury. And I use glutathione, which the body should produce, but often in these people, genetically, they don't make enough of it. And that's why they're the ones that get sick and their colleagues don't. And I would use phosphatidylcholine, which is what our cell membranes are made of. Brilliant for the brain and brilliant for detoxing these fat-soluble chemicals. So most of the pilots and cabin crew get better, but mostly they can't go back to that work.
Dr. Goodman, thank you so much. These were such important information, and I'm sure like many people are going to be benefiting from it. So you have a website, I assume?
Yes, it's drjennygoodman.com.
And you have 2 books out. Do you see clients?
No,
because
I have retired from clinical practice in order to focus 100% on writing more books. And also, I'm 68. A person can't keep working.
You're a true biohacker. Everything you said, now it's so popular in the biohacking world. It seems like you've been doing this for a while now in order to live healthy.
So I've been doing it since the year 1999. The British Society for Ecological Medicine has been going since 1983. And long before anybody had heard of functional medicine, which is what the Americans call it.
Sure.
We were doing this. And what is interesting is that my colleagues who are still working are saying it's getting harder. People are getting sicker. Even though we're learning all the time and we're getting really skilled, the population is getting sicker. There are more and more toxins that we're exposed to. So the job is getting harder, but plenty of people in the British Society for Ecological Medicine are still doing this work. On my website, I've got a list of colleagues, not just BSEM people and not just doctors, nutritional therapists, naturopaths. There's many good practitioners out there. So people can find that list on my website if they want to see someone who takes this kind of approach.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was amazing for me. And hopefully one day, I come often to London. Maybe one of my trips, I would get a chance to see you face to face.
Let's meet up IRL, as the kids say, in real life.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Lovely to meet you, Esra.